At that evening BBQ, right there in the packed backyard with dozens of phones live streaming, my son-in-law pointed a finger in my face and said loud enough for all of Mesa Luna Drive to hear, "Old man, get inside and grab some beers. Get the good ones. Don't bring that cheap stuff you drink." Then he gave this smug little laugh and added, "You're freeloading here, so you better serve." His buddies howled, one of them shoving a phone right up at me like they were filming some bargain bin comedy. My daughter stood right behind him and said nothing. If you've ever been humiliated in front of a crowd, treated like a servant in your own home, treated like you weren't worth a single can of beer, leave a dot and hit subscribe, because what happened after that was crueler than any insult. I still remember that afternoon on Mesa Luna Drive, every whiff of charcoal smoke. The New Mexico sunset poured into the backyard like a thin layer of honey, sticking to the wooden fence and the white plastic tables. Cold beer cans beaded with sweat lay scattered everywhere. I carried a tray of smoked brisket fresh out of the pit, a red striped towel slung over my shoulder, walking through the wooden gate I'd paid to have built, hearing country music blasting from the Bluetooth speaker by the BBQ station. Lena's backyard was already crowded. String lights hung from the porch to the birch tree at the far end, blinking softly. The smell of grilled meat, BBQ sauce, beer, and cheap perfume mixed in the air. I caught a faint trace of something else. The smell of fresh car paint and engine oil still stuck to my hands, even after washing 3 times. The smell my whole life was tied to. 2 years ago, they weren't here. When the housing market stalled, Dean got cut from Suncrest Realty, and Lena lost nearly half her hours at the dental office. Their old apartment rent shot up by a few $100s a month, more than they could handle. One night, Lena called, voice both nervous and embarrassed. "Dad, can we stay with you for a few months? Just until we get back on our feet?" I nodded. I always nod when my kid needs me. A few months quietly stretched into 2 years, their stuff taking over every corner of the house, except the promise, "We'll move out once we're stable." That one never seemed to show up. "Rowan, brisket's here!" Lena waved from near the salad table, hair in a high ponytail, wearing a white t-shirt with Dean's real estate company logo. Her smile softened something tight in my chest. I shifted the tray to ease my arms, weaving past a group of younger folks crowded around the beer pong table. A shadow stepped right in front of me. "Careful there, Pitts. Don't drop our $1,000,000 brisket." Dean's voice came out in a chuckle. He wore a fitted button-down and a flashy watch. Beside him, 6 or 7 of his friends stood with their phones raised. A blonde girl with oversized sunglasses, even though it was nearly dusk, was live streaming on Instagram. "Guys, this is the most famous neighbor on Mesa Luna Drive," she said into her camera, dragging her voice. "The old guy who fixes vintage cars, and according to my friend's husband, lives off his daughter." The whole group cracked up. I pretended not to hear, gave a thin smile, and kept walking. A couple of kids nearby sniffed the air, eyes lighting up at the scent of brisket. I set the tray down on the long table near the porch. "I'm a little late. Had to finish watching over that Mustang at the shop before I could leave." I murmured to Lena as I lifted the lid, letting the warm smoke drift out. One whole side of the brisket glowed deep red-brown, the outer bark peppered black. Lena inhaled, smiled. "Oh my God, it smells just like when I was little." "Thanks, Dad." That thank you was enough to make me forget the freeloading comment for a moment. I wiped my hands, adjusted the red-striped towel on instinct. At the far end of the yard, Dean had climbed a small wooden step by the karaoke setup, mic in hand. The speaker let out a soft squeal before settling. "Hey everyone," he shouted. "Give it up for my wife, Lena, who made this place the most valuable spot on Mesa Luna Drive." Scattered claps, a couple of whistles. Dean waited for the noise to drop, then added louder, "And for those who don't know, I'm the guy who made this damn mortgage happen. Thank you, real estate market." Laughter erupted. I stood by the porch edge, holding a plastic plate, hearing him say, "I'm the one who made this mortgage happen," and felt my jaw tighten. The house title, my signature, $210,000 for the down payment, pulled from my retirement account. 2 years ago, I refinanced this house to raise money, to rebuild my shop and cover my wife's end-of-life medical bills. That refinance became the mortgage Dean loved bragging about. But here, under the glow of string lights and cold beer, no one knew, no one cared. To them, Dean was the man who brought my daughter to her dream neighborhood. "Dad, eat," Lena said, placing a slice of brisket on my plate, not noticing the way my face had darkened. I nodded, speared a small piece. A thin wisp of smoke rose, melting into the scent of charcoal outside. I hadn't even swallowed when I heard Dean behind me. "Hey, Grease Man!" I turned. He stood a few steps away, no mic now, but loud enough for his friends to hear. The blonde girl was still live streaming, camera pointed at us. "You got a free hand?" Dean asked, grin curling, eyes shiny with beer. "We're out of beer. Go grab more. Corona only. None of that cheap stuff you drink." Snickers popped around. Someone repeated "Grease Man" and burst out laughing. I looked at Lena. She stood behind Dean, plastic cup in hand. Her eyes flicked to me for half a second, then slid away. "Dean," I said, steadying my voice. "I just got here. Still smell like smoke. Let the boys grab it. There's plenty in the fridge." Dean shrugged, stepped closer, beer breath mixing with BBQ sauce. "You're standing right there. I'm talking to guests. And this is my house, right? I say it. You do it. Simple." One of his buddies nodded, muttering, "Old man should be grateful for living here free." The blonde girl raised her phone closer, whispering to her viewers, "Drama time, guys." "This is Lena's house," I said quietly, though my eyes didn't leave Dean. "And right now, I just want to eat a meal with my daughter like a normal person." "Lena's house?" Dean barked out a laugh. "Cute. Whose name's on the mortgage, huh?" He turned to the crowd. "Whose is it, guys?" "Dean's!" a drunk voice shouted, the group cackling. I swallowed the sharp pinch in my chest. "Mine," I said, not lowering my voice this time. "High Mesa Credit Union. Loan under Rowan Pitts. Mortgage payments for the past 2 years from my account." The air dipped for a beat. A few people blinked, surprised. Dean froze for half a second, then burst into an exaggerated laugh. "Man, you're hilarious. Come on, it's a party. Don't drag out boring paperwork talk. People are watching the live stream." He waved at the camera. "Hello to 50 people watching. This is my father-in-law, the Grease Man, king of Sierra Valley Garage." The blonde girl smirked into her phone. "He's obsessed with the house, guys, even though he's freeloading." Lena stayed silent, her lips pressed tight, but no words came. Not a single. Dad helped with the house. Don't exaggerate. Show some respect. Just silence. And silence is sometimes the loudest noise. Dean leaned in, voice dropping low but still audible to the circle around us. "Listen, Mr. Pitts, you live here without paying a single dime, at least from what we see. You don't work for a company, don't have a boss, don't have a 401k like normal people." He glanced down at my denim shirt, at the faint smear of oil I'd missed when changing earlier. He said, "You want to keep enjoying this nice backyard, that nice living room, that big flat-screen TV? Then learn to contribute. Around here, you're the free labor father-in-law. We need beer. You go get it. We need dishes washed. You roll up your sleeves." The crowd laughed again, fewer this time, but sharper, like knives scraping the cutting board. I felt my throat go dry. My hand tightened on the plastic plate until it creaked. In the corner of the yard, a kid kicked a plastic ball. It bounced off the fence and rolled back, carefree like nothing was happening. "Dean, stop!" a smaller guy with a buzz cut muttered. "Let him eat." Dean waved him off. "Relax, man. I'm just laying out the rules." Lena stared down into her beer, dodging my eyes. In that split second, I saw her at 10 years old, sitting in my old garage, legs swinging, smiling wide when I let her try tightening a bolt on the '72 Chevy. Back then, the smell of oil and paint was Dad's smell. Now, in front of her husband's friends, that smell was a punchline. Dean walked back to the karaoke stand and picked up the mic again. All right, everyone, he said, voice carrying through the speakers. Before we get back to this amazing, just closed another deal party, he lifted a beer can. A few whistles rose. I want everyone to give a special round of applause. He gestured toward me, eyes lit like he'd found the best joke of the night. Let's thank Rowan Pitts, the only man in Sierra Valley who smells like gasoline even at a family party. Laughter exploded like fireworks. Someone slapped the table, and someone nearly choked on their beer. The blonde girl added to her live stream, "Smell like work, huh?" Someone pretended to sniff the air, then covered their nose. I stood there in the middle of the laughter, holding an empty plastic plate, feeling myself shrink into a shadow in the garage, surrounded by cars that didn't need anyone's respect. Only my eyes didn't shrink. They stayed cold, sweeping slowly across every face, stopping the longest on Lena. My daughter was less than 10 feet away, but the distance felt like the whole New Mexico desert. She stayed silent, silence choosing a side, silence letting her husband stand on the back of the man who had paid every mortgage dollar for this house. The music came back on. Dean switched off the mic, stepped down from the wooden block, and walked toward me. His voice dropped, loud enough for the people around us, but no longer in the speakers. "Simple rules, old man," he said, lip curling. "Either you serve me or you get out of this house. There is no third option." In that moment, I felt the smell of brisket, beer, perfume, gasoline in the cracks of my hands. And another smell, the scent of something that had just broken with a tiny sound only I could hear. I didn't argue. Didn't say, "My name's on the house." Didn't say, "I paid." I just looked Dean in the eyes for 3 seconds, long enough for him to blink, lose a sliver of confidence, then cover it with a stiff smile. I set the plate down on the table, gently, like setting down something fragile. My hand pulled the red striped towel off my shoulder, folded it once, and tucked it into my back pocket. Then I turned and walked out of the Mesa Luna Drive backyard, through the music, the laughter, the string lights blinking above me as if nothing had just happened. I didn't say a word, but in my head, a sentence had already been written. All right, you chose. I left Mesa Luna Drive without looking back, only hearing the karaoke speakers behind me still screeching the warped notes of whatever song Dean liked to perform whenever he was drunk on power. Night falls fast in Sierra Valley. As I drove the 1972 Chevrolet C10 down the slope coated in red dust, the sun was just a thin slice of weak orange caught between the yucca ridges. That was the moment I understood. If I went back to that house, I would no longer be myself. Desert Lantern Motel appeared like a streak of green neon stranded in the New Mexico dark. The sign flickered. Vacancy. The letter C dead for who knows how many years. I took room 14, ground floor, right next to an old vending machine buzzing like a dying animal. The room was small, with a single bed, a worn carpet, and beige walls peeling near the AC unit. But it had one thing that made it a refuge: silence. I sat on the edge of the bed, opened my backpack, and took out the 8-year expense ledger. Brown leather cover, edges yellowed. I placed the red striped towel beside it, like laying down a piece of myself after hours of being called Grease Man. The soft yellow desk lamp bled onto the page like old honey. The AC clicked with each cycle of heat and cold, and the smell of dry wood from the motel floor pulled up memories of the workshop in my garage, the place I raised Lena with hands full of oil and resolve. I flipped the ledger. 8 years. Every month, mortgage I paid, utilities I paid, the home insurance, the SUV insurance. Dean bragged to his friends he bought with bonus money. I remembered every dollar I moved into the wedding fund for Lena, the money Dean bragged about as if he'd covered everything for the wedding. I remembered nights in the workshop with only the saw and the wall fan humming, and the little picture of 10-year-old Lena I kept on the shelf, wearing oversized gloves, proudly holding a screwdriver because she'd just taken her bike wheel off by herself. I raised my kid with every breath, every drop of sweat. And tonight, she stood still, besides a man who saw me as unpaid staff. I opened my laptop. The motel's Wi-Fi was weak, the clack of keys joining the sound of trucks on the highway outside. I reviewed every account, every bill, all under my name, not Lena's, and sure as hell not Dean's. They lived in that house because I signed the mortgage, fixed every board, every pipe. I let Dean brag as he bought it, because I thought that didn't matter. But tonight, Lena's silence gave me my answer. Kindness doesn't belong in the hands of people who don't know its worth. I wrote a list, each item in a clean, straight line, clear as an engine blueprint. Mortgage, cut. Insurance, cut. Car, insurance, cut. Utilities, cut. Credit cards, close. Wedding fund, freeze immediately and move everything to personal hold account. I added another line. Cease all financial support for Dean starting June 5th. I looked at the clock, 11:58 p.m. A day almost over. But for me, everything was just beginning. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay staring at the motel ceiling, the neon light outside blinking, painting faint green stripes across the wall like the slow heartbeat of a man who has had enough. I closed my eyes and little Lena appeared, running into the garage, showing off her bike with the wheel removed, asking me, "Dad, can you fix everything in the world?" I once answered, "I can only fix what still wants to be fixed." And tonight, that sentence came back. Cold, sharp, brutally true. Morning. The traffic on the highway grew louder. I sat up, washed my face with cold water in the chipped porcelain sink. I put on my dark gray mechanic shirt, folded the red striped towel into my back pocket like an old ritual. I pulled out my phone and made the call. Hi, Mesa Credit Union. 1 ring, 2 rings, 3 rings, then a woman's voice. Hi, Mesa Credit Union. How may I assist you? I gripped the edge of the desk. I want to begin the process of canceling all automatic payments connected to the Mesa Luna Drive house, effective today. From that moment, the wheels of my financial campaign began to turn, slow but unstoppable. And from that moment, I was no longer the man in the backyard BBQ being mocked on livestream by a drunk kid. I was Rowan Pitts, and I had just taken back the keys to my own life. Morning at the Desert Lantern Motel always began with the smell of sun-baked dry wood and the old AC unit firing off strained clicks, like it was counting down its last breaths. I sat at the wooden table by the window, a cup of black coffee from the old Keurig tasting like metal, opened my laptop, and put the stack of files on my lap. This wasn't some impulsive revenge plan after a humiliating BBQ. This was resetting the order of my life, step by step, by the book, by the process, leaving no room for anyone to claim I did it wrong. I started with the biggest piece, the mortgage for the house on Mesa Luna Drive. There's no full amount by Friday like in the movies. In New Mexico, everything runs through a process. Delinquency, notices, and then the threat of acceleration. I knew that, so I wasn't scared of warnings. The mortgage autopay was set up by me through High Mesa Credit Union. I canceled it immediately. After cancellation, the system displayed, next due, June 05, status, unpaid. That house carries my name. Lena is an occupant, not an owner. Dean is even less relevant. From the moment autopay stopped, the legal sequence begins automatically. A 30-day notice of late payment, sent to the email under my name, CC'd to the house address, meaning on the 5th of the next month, they will receive their first letter. Payment overdue, not foreclosure, not thrown onto the street, just the opening step of an awakening. I took a sip of coffee and opened the file AME Mortgage Policy, rereading every line to be certain. After 45 days late, they send an intent to accelerate, the formal letter saying if no agreement or payment plan is in place, they may demand the entire balance due. If around 90 days pass with no response, the file moves into foreclosure review, and even then negotiation is still possible. I knew that, and I also knew Dean didn't. He was used to bragging that the house is mostly paid, despite never having paid a cent. I checked off a line in my notebook: auto pay canceled, completed. Next step, car insurance. Lena and Dean had 2 vehicles, a newer SUV and a leased sedan, but the entire insurance policy was under my name, with them listed as drivers. I called Geico's hotline. A calm male voice asked, "How would you like to change your policy?" I answered, "Cancel all coverage for both vehicles, effective tomorrow." He confirmed, read the policy terms, and sent an email. Termination notice. Everything legal, transparent, unchallengeable. I had no obligation to insure 2 vehicles owned by people who treated me like hired help. Insurance done. On to credit cards. I had 3 cards, 2 jointly held with Lena, and 1 authorized user card added for Dean a year ago because he had business trips. I removed Lena from the 2 joint cards. I didn't close them, just removed her access. I dropped Dean's credit limit from $10,000 to $300. Then he was removed completely, leaving the note: authorized user removed. 3 email pings arrived. Your limit has changed. A user has been removed. Your request is confirmed. I exhaled, light, like releasing a bolt that had been over-tightened for years. Finally, I called the life insurance company. For a long time, my beneficiary had been Lena. But now I understand that to give something to your child, sometimes you first have to teach them the meaning of gratitude. I told the representative, I want to change the beneficiary, redirect it to the Sierra Valley Mechanical Apprenticeship Fund, a small fund I started after my wife passed, to support kids who wanted to learn the trade. The agent asked, "What effective date?" "Today." I e-signed. The new line appeared on my screen. Primary beneficiary, Sierra Valley Mechanical Apprenticeship Fund. I leaned back, listening to the AC give a long sigh as it had just completed a long haul. Everything was lawful. Everything was procedural. Dean couldn't sue. Lena couldn't say I was acting out. I was simply taking back what I had given and what they had taken for granted. Evening fell, harsher in Sierra Valley. The wind carried dust and a hot metal scent from Highway 17. I sat in the room, neon red from the motel sign stretching across the window like long, sharp cuts. My phone lit up. Lena called, 12 times. Between those were 9 calls from Dean. Then voicemails. "Rowan, don't act childish." "Old man, pick up the phone. Who do you think you are?" "Rowan, he said the bank called. What are you doing?" "Answer." I watched the screen light up and go dark, light up and go dark. I didn't answer, not out of anger, but because I knew, if I picked up, everything would fall back into the same loop. Me explaining, them blaming, and then them continuing to live on my effort as if it were owed to them. I placed the phone face down on the old motel table. The red neon slid over the back of the phone, reflecting a cold slash of light on the red striped towel lying beside it. That was the moment I knew. The storm of collapse had begun. But this time, I was the one behind the wheel. That night at the Desert Lantern Motel, the wind from Sierra Valley slid through the hallway with a faint metallic hiss, like steel scraping steel. I had just turned off the desk lamp when I heard hurried footsteps outside, then pounding on the door hard enough to rattle the wooden frame. "Rowan, open the door!" Dean's voice, thick with alcohol. Thick with that cheap kind of power he wrapped around himself whenever he had an audience, and I knew instantly how he found me. I'd left the 1972 Chevy C10 parked right in front of the motel office. That truck, dusty blue-gray with the sun-faded Pitts Restorations decal, stood out like a billboard among a lot full of cheap rental sedans. The Desert Lantern Motel had only 16 rooms. The reception stayed open all night. And Dean was the kind of man who barked at people to get answers. All he had to do was step inside, slap his ID on the counter, and bark one question. Which room is the old man with the classic truck in? And because I hadn't filed any privacy request, the night clerk only needed one glance at the ledger. Room 14. It took him less than 5 minutes to track me down. "What the hell are you doing, Dad? You trying to starve us?" Lena stood behind him, her voice shaking. With anger or fear, I couldn't tell. I sat still on the bed, eyes fixed on the chipped brown door. I didn't walk toward it, didn't answer, just listened, as Dean slammed the door again, harder, more unhinged. "I know you're in there. Coward. How long are you going to hide in this cheap motel?" I exhaled slowly. To the right of the door was the motel's CCTV camera, an old model with a blurry lens and a blinking red light, but it still recorded every movement, every threat. Enough for a judge to sign a restraining order within hours if I filed the paperwork. I stood, moved near the door, keeping a safe distance. "You told me to leave," I said, voice steady, neither raised nor lowered, so I left. The hallway outside went silent. 1 second. 2. Then Dean roared, slammed the door a final time before dragging Lana away. Footsteps echoed down the hall, fading into nothing. I waited 3 more minutes before sitting back down on the bed. I rested the red striped towel on my knee. My phone buzzed. Joel Watson, High Mesa Credit Union, branch manager, a man who'd known me since the day I opened my restoration shop. I answered. "Rowan, we need to talk privately." Joel's voice was tight, lacking the polish of a veteran banker. "This morning Dean came to the bank again." "Again?" I asked. "Yes, and not for the first time." A long pause on his end, then Joel continued. "You know about the home equity loan application he submitted 2 months ago, right?" I closed my eyes. "No. He brought in paperwork claiming you had granted full authorization to use the Mesa Luna Drive house as collateral. But the documents were fake, forged signature, fake notary stamp. Dates didn't match. We flagged the case in our internal fraud system and kept copies of everything." I tightened my grip on the phone. "Why are you telling me this now?" "Because Dean came back this morning demanding that the bank convince you to restart the mortgage auto pay." He slammed his fist on the counter and caused a scene in the lobby. "I saw he was losing control, so I figured it was time you knew." Joel sent an email. I opened my laptop. The screen lit up, reflecting the red neon through the motel window. The PDF files appeared. Application. Home. Equity. Loan. DINP. Loan. 60K PDF. Signature. Comparison.pdf. Fraud. Flag. Report. Internal PDF. My forged signature, curved wrong at the tail, completely off from my handwriting. The notary stamp used the wrong font. A sloppy fraud, but dangerous enough to slip past an inexperienced banker into a federal credit pool. Beneath the report was a highlighted line. Pending review. Suspicious cash advances. Estimated personal gambling debt. Over $20,000. Joel hadn't said this part aloud, but the yellow highlight told me he'd watched that debt grow for a while. An internal investigation was slowly cracking open like a fracture through cement. "Thank you, Joel," I said quietly. "I'll handle it." "Rowan, if you need a witness, I'll stand for you." "I know." I closed the laptop. The room dimmed again, lit only by the red neon glow of the Desert Lantern sign bleeding through the thin curtain. I put on my jacket, grabbed my keys, slipped the red striped towel into my back pocket, and walked into the night. The road from the motel to the garage cut through the dry fields of Sierra Valley, where the wind carried dust, burnt grass, and a vastness so wide it made a man feel small. I turned on the garage lights. White fluorescent glare spilled out, illuminating the 1968 Mustang I'd been restoring over the 4 years since my wife passed. The car wore the deep blue she loved, blue ember, I placed my hand on the hood, feeling the cool paint. Honey, I said into the quiet of the garage, I think it's time to take back what belongs to us. Dean had stepped too far, and I had just opened the door to a counterattack. No one in the Mesa Luna Drive house was sober enough to see coming. That morning, the wind from the Oregon mountains swept down into Sierra Valley, carrying the smell of dry soil and a trace of desert salt. I left the Desert Lantern Motel, drove the Chevrolet C10 to the law office in the town's old commercial block, a red brick building with a sun-faded sign that read, Granger and Lowell, Attorneys at Law. Alice Granger waited for me in a small conference room, walnut table, walls lined with plaques from cases she'd won. A middle-aged woman, silver black hair, eyes sharp in the way of someone who'd witnessed far too many family dramas in this region, but still spoke with the calm, clean edge of a freshly honed blade. Rowan, she said as I sat down, I reviewed everything you sent. The mortgage, expenses, bank documents, motel video, the fraud email from the bank. We will not use emotional arguments. In court, emotions weaken a case. I nodded slightly. I want everything lawful. No bitter revenge. I just want my life back. Alice opened the file, sliding each page toward me. These are the 3 legal grounds: strong, clean, and textbook. She tapped her pen on each line, slow and precise. Termination of license to occupy. Rowan never transferred ownership or signed any agreement granting permanent residency to Dean or Lena. Their presence in the home exists only by the owner's permission, and that permission can be revoked. Non-payment of agreed contribution, though not a formal contract, Dean and Lena acknowledged, via texts and emails, that they would contribute to expenses. In reality, Rowan paid 100%. This allows the court to classify it as a breach of occupancy agreement. Harassment and property misuse, the motel door slamming video I obtained with permission, the threatening voicemails, and the home equity loan application with forged documents, forming a pattern of threatening behavior and misuse of property information. These 3 grounds, Alice said, are enough for the court to issue a 30-day notice to vacate. And with the motel video, I can also request a restricted access order, preventing Dean from approaching you or your garage during the proceedings. I let out a long breath. Not relief. More like a sense that things were finally shifting back into their proper alignment. By noon, postscript, Sierra County Court approved the filing. A pale yellow document embossed with a raised seal. 30-day notice to vacate and restricted access order. I drove to the sheriff's office. Tin roof, the New Mexico flag snapping in the wind out front. Deputy Morales, a man with a deep voice and the build of someone pulled straight from a western, took the envelope, skimmed the paperwork, then asked, "You want delivery today?" "As soon as possible." I stood by the curb on Mesa Luna Drive as Morales walked into the yard, his brown uniform stark against the dry grass. The moment the notice was taped to the wooden door, Dean burst out, shouting, "He can't do this! This is my house! I put work into it!" Ridiculous. He yelled so loud it echoed down the street. Neighbors opened doors, one even recorded it. A woman from number 27 called out, "Isn't the house in Rowan's name?" Hearing that only made Dean more frantic. He jabbed his finger at Morales, at me, at the neighbor's camera, spitting profanity nonstop. Morales said only one sentence, calm but steel cold. "You are being recorded. Please remain civil." But Dean didn't know the meaning of civil. He kicked a planter, screamed into his phone, cursed the sheriff, cursed the neighbor filming, every second captured on camera. And within 2 hours, the video was on the Sierra Valley Community Group, the town's 4,000-plus member feed. The caption someone posted, "Dean from Mesa Luna Drive getting served an eviction. Turns out the house isn't actually his like he claimed. I got a notification that the clip was stretching. I opened it. Dean raging in the yard, chest heaving, eyes blazing, while I stood off to the side, silent, hands in the pockets of my mechanic jacket, the red striped towel peeking out. I didn't smile, didn't gloat. I just watched the screen and thought, justice isn't loud. It starts when light hits the truth. And that night, back at the Desert Lantern Motel, I closed the door, switched on the warm lamp, set the red striped towel on the table, and for the first time since the BBQ, my heart wasn't shaking anymore. Justice had begun to move, and I knew my counterattack had only entered its first chapter. The next morning, as Sierra Valley sunlight laid a thin sheet of gold over the adobe roofs, I walked into Sierra Coffee just to buy an Americano. But the whole shop fell silent when the doorbell chimed. 2 older men at the window table looked up first. Then a young barista whispered to her coworker, "That's Mr. Pitts, Lena's dad." I heard a question rise from the table near the counter. "What's wrong with your son-in-law? I saw that clip last night on the Sierra Valley chat group." I didn't answer, just nodded and took my coffee. But that silence was enough for the entire cafe to understand something had cracked behind the door of Mesa Luna Drive. When I stepped back outside, the dry New Mexico wind swept across the glass windows of High Mesa Credit Union. Then I saw Dean standing on the front steps, hands in his pockets, shirt unbuttoned at the chest, eyes bloodshot like a man who hadn't slept or was drowning in debt. The moment he saw me, he flashed a mocking smile and shouted like he was making a speech to an audience. "Here he is, the town's dementia old man, abandoned his own daughter, cut off all the money, then hid in a cheap motel like a failure." His voice was loud enough for even the people at the ATM to turn. A young mother pulled her son away. 2 guys by their motorcycles exchanged looks and smirked. Dean stepped closer, raising his voice even more, dripping venom. "He's so selfish. He lets his daughter struggle with bills just because he wants control. Right, Rowan? Or did you forget everything already? Dementia hits fast for old folks like you." There were at least 15 people on the bank steps. Some stopped completely, phones already recording. A man whispered, "This looks serious." I stood still. Silence can be sharper than any punch. And when I spoke, I delivered 3 sentences. 3 clean cuts that made the air vibrate like someone had dropped a glass pane on tile. "1," I said, my voice calm to the point of unsettling. "I'm the one who paid the mortgage for 4 years straight, and you haven't paid a single cent." 2 people near the bank entrance immediately turned to Dean, surprised. "2," I continued, "you owe more than $20,000 at Sun Mesa Casino, and I have the preliminary report from the bank's internal investigation." A ripple of whispers burst through the crowd like electricity. "No way! Is that real? He gambles?" Dean's face drained, but before he could react, I spoke the final line, the one that made a young man nearby mutter, "Oh shit," under his breath. 3, I said clearly, "you used forged documents to try to take a home equity loan on a house that's in my name." The crowd fell silent for 2 whole seconds, then shifted instantly, like a sudden desert gust. A man raised his phone. "I'm recording in full HD. The whole town needs to know this." A girl looked Dean up and down and said loud enough for him to hear, "Didn't think you were that type of guy." Dean stumbled back a step, mouth open but empty of words. He looked around, but no one stood with him. Not one. The entire small town of Sierra Valley seemed to be seeing him clearly for the first time. Stripped bare under the sun, without the polished husband facade he'd worn for years. An older woman crossed her arms. "I used to think he was a good man." "Lord," the crowd grew louder. One young man said, "Cut the mortgage? No. Mr. Pitts saved that whole family for 4 years. Another shook his head. "And forged documents? That's criminal." Dean grabbed my arm and screamed, "You're lying! You miserable old bastard!" The man recording shouted back, It's all on camera. Dean froze. His tiny world, this tiny town of Sierra Valley, was staring at him like a man caught without his mask in broad daylight. I said nothing more. I only adjusted the red striped towel in my pocket, walked past him, pulled open the door of High Mesa Credit Union, and stepped inside. The crowd parted into an invisible aisle. No one blocked me. No one defended him. No one believed in the perfect husband image he'd sold for years. As the glass door closed behind me, I heard a man say, "Bet this clip hits Sierra Valley community page tonight." I didn't need to turn around. I already knew. The first storm had begun. And this time, it wasn't sweeping over me. It was sweeping over him. I arrived at the Sierra Valley Sheriff's Office at 9:12 a.m. The New Mexico sky had that bruised blue clarity after a night of rain. Clean, cold, and silent. As if the whole town were holding its breath for something about to break. Detective Miguel Salazar sat in a small meeting room, the LED light catching the silver badge on his chest. He didn't warm up with small talk. He slid a file across the table, his voice steady but heavy enough to shift the air in the room. "Mr. Pitts, we've reviewed the records on Dean Herrick's." I said nothing. He opened the first page. Dean visited Sun Mesa Casino 7 times in 10 weeks. Each time he withdrew money from 2 credit cards under Lana's name, and Lena can't qualify for a card with a limit over $1,000. Meaning, Salazar looked at me. "You're the one paying." I nodded slightly. He turned to the next page. 2 debts have been pushed to collection agencies. Total, $27,400. And there's this. He placed another report on the table. Dean has a history of property violence when drunk. Hailstone's court had to call the sheriff once because he threw a chair through a back window. I frowned. Lena never said anything. "People under someone's control usually don't," Salazar said softly, but only softly for a beat. Then he returned to the tone of a man who's seen too many domestic tragedies. "Mr. Pitts, I've watched the entire motel CCTV footage, the neighbor's video of Dean yelling, and the clip of him outside High Mesa calling you demented." I remained silent. Salazar leaned forward, fingers interlaced. "Those 3 clips together are enough for us to request a restraining order within 24 to 48 hours. He paused, then asked plainly, with a hint of respect, "Do you want to file it?" I looked out the window. The sky was brighter than when I walked in. Sunlight hit someone's truck bed outside, flashing a streak of gold just like the neon glare in my garage when the lights come on. I said slowly, clearly, "I don't want to hurt anyone, but I will not let a man hurt my daughter again." Salazar nodded and opened his laptop to draft the petition. In under 10 minutes, he slid a printed sheet toward me. "Order of protection, 500 feet. I signed. My hand didn't shake. 2 days later, exactly 5:43 p.m., Sheriff Caldwell drove his patrol truck onto Mesa Luna Drive. Porch lights flicked on up and down the street. Kids rode bikes. Grown-ups carried grocery bags. A peaceful evening. Peaceful in the small-town way, until the sheriff turned on the loudspeaker. "Dean Herrick's, step into the front yard." The door swung open. Dean stepped out, beer can in hand, a sight almost too perfect in its tragic irony. Tank top, red face, breath heavy with alcohol. Caldwell read the order clearly. "By ruling of Sierra Valley Court, Mr. Dean Herrick's is required to maintain a minimum distance of 500 feet from Mr. Rowan Pitts for 6 months. First violation is a misdemeanor. Second violation, a felony." Neighbors stopped in their tracks. An elderly woman pulled her small dog close. A man watering plants froze and let the hose spill across the pavement. A kid held up a phone to record. Dean let out a low, bitter laugh. "This is ridiculous. Some greasy old mechanic can—" Caldwell raised a hand. "One more word, and I cuff you." Dean went still. Lena stepped into the doorway behind him, her face pale as chalk, and I stood at the far end of the street, inside the silver-gray C10, not getting out, not speaking. I simply watched Dean receive the paper like a man handed the first unofficial sentence of his life. No one congratulated him. No one spoke for him. No one stood beside him. That small cluster of neighbors, the same people who once believed he bought that house, now looked at him like a long unsolved puzzle suddenly clarified. When the sheriff climbed back into the patrol vehicle and shut the door, Dean hurled his beer can to the ground. Foam splattered across the pavement like the final sputter of an engine pushed past its limit. I nodded slightly, not at Dean, at myself. Justice doesn't show up in shouting. It arrives when the light hits the truth. And that evening, the Sierra Valley sunlight landed squarely on Dean. In every sense of the word, this was only the beginning. Morning in Sierra Valley always carries a strange kind of light, not harsh like the desert, not cold like the mountains. It's a soft gold, slipping over wooden fences, sliding into porch shadows, illuminating everything people try to hide. And that day, that light exposed Dean's first fall completely. The real estate company he worked for, Suncrest Realty, sent an email to all employees at 8:12 a.m. I knew because someone in town screenshot it and posted it into the Sierra Valley Neighborhood Watch group. The subject line held only 4 words: professional conduct violation, termination. The body contained a single short sentence, but it was enough for everyone to understand. Employee involved in viral incident at High Mesa Credit Union, violating company standards. It was the clip of Dean standing on the bank steps, shouting in my face that I had dementia, that I abandoned my daughter, in front of nearly 20 people. That clip now had over 33,000 views, in a community with only 11,000 residents. Suncrest Realty had already flagged his attitude before. This clip was the breaking point, and Suncrest Realty had an immediate termination for public misconduct clause. One viral video damaging company reputation was enough for HR to fire instantly. No meeting, no warning, and he was fired in under 12 hours after it spread. When I drove past Copper Ridge, I saw Dean standing on the porch, face pale like a latex coat applied wrong. In his hand was a white envelope, termination papers. The man who once pounded his chest and bragged to friends that real estate is about power now stood like a piece of unseasoned lumber, ready to snap at a touch. But his downfall didn't stop there. 3:41 p.m. A black F-150 pickup stopped in front of the house. 2 men stepped out, heavy jackets, dark glasses. No need for introductions. The shoes and the stride told everything. Collectors. They slapped a bright red notice right on the door. Past due, $27,400. Gambling debt. The red ink bled in the sun, but every digit remained sharp as a blade. They knocked twice. No one answered. They knocked a 3rd time, hard enough to make the wind chime rattle. Then one of them said loud enough for the entire street to hear, "Tell Dean Parks we don't knock a 4th time." Neighbors stepped onto porches. Some held coffee mugs. Others pretended to water plants. But every eye was watching. It was a slap to Dean's illusions, delivered in broad daylight. I stood 2 houses down, leaning against the C-10. Not joyful, not gloating. But justice rarely arrives gently. When the F-150 drove off, the wind lifted one corner of the red notice. Dean burst out the door, yanked it down as if tearing away evidence of himself. But the neighbors had already seen. The kids pushing their bikes had seen. The whole town had. Lena called me at 5:12 p.m. 12 missed calls before that. This time I answered. Her voice broke. Nothing like the girl who once held a screwdriver in my garage at age 10. Just panic. "Dad, he got fired, and something got posted on the door. You need to do something. Just demands. Just expectations. Just the same pattern that led me to being humiliated at the BBQ. I looked at the neon reflection on my truck's hood. a soft red-blue shimmer, like the heartbeat of someone who'd stood outside disappointment long enough that it no longer crushed him. I spoke slowly, every word firm, steady. You can talk to me when you're no longer standing on the side of what's wrong. Silence on the other end. Not the silence of listening. The silence of someone forced to look into a mirror and finally see their own face. Dad, how can you say that to me? I sighed softly. I don't want to, but I need to. A small sob. Then the call ended. I sat in the truck, watching Mesa Luna Drive sink into dusk. The wind carried the smell of dry sage and warm wood, the signature scent of New Mexico. I felt no triumph. I didn't want revenge on my daughter, but some roads only open when the truth is dragged into the sunlight. And today, Dean's truth had been stripped bare before the entire town, and this was only the middle of the story, because I knew Dean's fall hadn't hit bottom yet, and my justice wasn't finished. After all the noise, I needed a place quiet enough to face the only person I still wanted to speak honestly with. My daughter. I chose to meet Lena at the Broken Spoke Diner, the little eatery along Highway 17 where every morning smells like bacon, where the grill pops and crackles, and New Mexico sunlight pours through the windows like a thin sheet of gold laid over everything. The place isn't fancy, but it's where I used to take Lena every birthday when she was little. She loved the pancakes here, especially the ones dusted with powdered sugar in a smiley face. Now she walked in with red, swollen eyes, hair tied in a rush, her posture shrunken like someone blown off course by her own life. But the first thing she said wasn't, "Dad, are you okay?" It was, "Why did you do this to us?" I pulled out the chair, sat at the window table. In front of me was a stack of papers thick enough to be an audit book. I turned it toward Lena. "I didn't do anything to you," I said slowly. "I just stopped letting people take from me." Lena looked down at the stack, trying to read, but I knew every line of numbers was a knife pressed into the illusion Dean had wrapped around her for 4 years. I opened each page, my voice steady, clear like an engine running at idle. $210,000, the down payment for the Mesa Luna Drive house. Turned a page. $38,000, the wedding fund. Another page. $1,950 every month for 4 years. Utilities, insurance, car insurance, credit cards, and even the Costco card Dean bragged was his money. All of it came from my account. Lena covered her mouth. Her lips trembled. Her eyes filled as if she was seeing, for the first time, what her life had been built on all these years. I didn't know. "Right," I said, "because you never asked, and Dean never told the truth." Lena bowed her head, gripping her water glass so tight her knuckles whitened. "Dean said he was the provider." "Provider of what?" I tilted my head. "A man who screamed at his father-in-law in public? A man who used forged documents to apply for a $60,000 home equity loan? A gambler owing $27,400? That last line made Lena look up, eyes wide. "He owes how much?" $27,400, I repeated, and now they slapped a red notice on the door. "The whole town has seen it." Lena burst into tears, but the painful part wasn't the tears. It was what she said next. "Dad, I never asked you for money. I was wrong." She wiped her eyes, voice cracking. "I trusted the wrong person, and I know I hurt you. I just want you to forgive me." I leaned back. It hurt, but it wasn't surprising. That was the core of this entire story. Lena chose to protect the face of what was wrong, instead of protecting her own dignity. And mine. I opened my bag, took out a manila envelope. Inside were 3 documents. "These are the conditions for you to come back to me," I said. "You want me to trust you? Then you start with the truth." I laid each paper on the table like bricks, rebuilding a bridge that had rotted. Public acknowledgement of the truth at Sierra Valley Church this Sunday. No circling around it, no excuses. You just say, my dad paid and my dad didn't abandon anyone. Lena swallowed hard. I continued. A public post on the Sierra Valley Community Group and on your Facebook. Say the truth, plain, unedited, not shaped for Dean. Lena's hands shook. A letter of apology to banker Joel Watson for Dean's forged documents. He's the man who protected you from losing the house. The least you can do is respect him. Lena cried harder, a quiet, broken sound like someone realizing the bridge they'd walked on all their life was built from someone else's sacrifice. Dad, I can do it. I cut her off gently. This is between you and me. I don't save people who don't want to be saved. Lena froze. I added the final line, the seal on all the conditions. You can rebuild things with me, I said softly but firmly, but not with my assets. Lena looked at me like she was finally seeing a part of me she'd never understood. The part of a man who had endured enough, loved enough, but also knew how to protect himself when respect ran out. A truck rumbled past, the vibration trembling through the window. I stood, tucking the red-striped towel back into my pocket. I'm always here, Lena, I said, but not to be used, and never to be disrespected. I left the pancake bill on the table, an old habit I wasn't ready to break. As I stepped out of the diner, the Sierra Valley sun hit my truck with that thin gold glow again. I knew either Lena would walk under the bridge I'd rebuilt, or that bridge would remain only on paper. But this time, the choice no longer belonged to Dean. It belonged to my daughter, and it belonged to the truth. Sunday in Sierra Valley always carries a strange kind of light. Not too bright, not too cold, as if someone deliberately left a little warmth behind for those trying to find their way out of their own mistakes. That morning I sat in the 6th row, right side, beneath the familiar creaking ceiling fan of the town church. I still wore my dark gray mechanic shirt, the red striped towel tucked in my back pocket. A reminder that I came here with the truth, not for a performance. The church was more crowded than usual, over 150 people. Some whispered, some looked at me, some at Lena, some discreetly raised their phones. Everyone knew today was the day my daughter would speak the truth the town had gossiped about for 3 weeks. Pastor Grant closed his hymnal, and Lena stood. Her face was pale, her eyes swollen from a sleepless night. She held the paper I had given her at the diner, gripping it so tightly the edges bent. The room fell into a silence so thick you could hear the wind brushing against the wooden roof outside. Lena stepped toward the pulpit, small steps. She bumped the microphone slightly, adjusted it. Her voice trembled like a guitar string stretched too tight. I want to say this in front of the community. My dad did not abandon us. A few murmurs rose from the back rows. Lena gripped the paper harder. The house on Mesa Luna Drive was paid for by my dad. The entire down payment. The entire 4 years of mortgage. Utilities, insurance, everything. The whispering grew louder. A woman lifted her hand to her mouth. Lena continued. Dean lied to everyone, and I allowed it. I stood on the wrong side. Her voice cracked on the word wrong. I looked down at my hands, the hands that built a garage, that once held her on a bike seat 30 years ago, and felt one thing, pain and relief, mixed together. Lena inhaled deeply, read the most important line, Dean used forged documents to apply for a loan. If banker Joel Watson hadn't caught it, we would have lost our home. The crowd erupted. Shock gasps. Oh my God, is that true? Lord have mercy. And then, as if it had all been scripted, a man near the entrance stood up, blue shirt, gray tie, a file bag in his hand. Joel Watson, the town's banker. He stepped into the aisle. I confirm, Joel said, voice clear, steady, unwavering. Dean Herrick's brought forged documents to High Mesa Credit Union 3 months ago. We flagged it as fraud and filed an internal report. Lena went white, The crowd's faces flushed red with shock. The entire room turned into a storm of whispers, bouncing off the wooden walls like hail. An elderly woman clutched her chest. A man exhaled sharply, shaking his head. A group of teenagers held up their phones to record. And right then, the church doors swung open. A figure in uniform stepped inside. Sheriff Miguel Salazar. He held a black case folder, walking straight to the front row. Pastor Grant stepped aside. The sheriff scanned the room, his voice low but clear. "I'm here regarding a federal inquiry involving interstate gambling debts and the use of interstate wires. We need to speak with Dean Herrick's." The entire church felt struck by lightning. Someone whispered, "Wait, that's federal crime territory." Dean, sitting in the back corner, wearing a black baseball cap, trying to shrink into his seat, jumped up. He tripped over the chair in front of him, stumbled forward, then bolted toward the side exit like a panicked animal. But the crowd had already risen. A forest of phones pointed at him. Someone shouted, "Explain yourself!" "Come back!" Dean burst into the churchyard, and like every small-town humiliation story, he didn't escape the crowd. Outside, 3 middle-aged men blocked his path. A girl live-streamed, camera locked on him. The wind cut across the microphone, screeching through the feed. Dean spun around, face red, hair disheveled, eyes wild. "Turn the camera off!" he shouted. "No!" a woman's voice answered. "You lied to the whole town. We deserve to know." The sheriff stepped out behind him, not touching him, just saying, "You're making this worse." The murmurs around them sharpened into the kind of cruel honesty only a small town delivers when it feels betrayed. He lied to the whole church. Unbelievable. Lord, poor Mr. Pitts. He deserves it. Someone turned their camera to full zoom, closing in on Dean's twisted face as humiliation tightened around him. Another voice shouted, "Say something, Dean!" He couldn't. His throat froze. His eyes darted everywhere. The entire community watched him collapse. Slowly, clearly, irreversibly. Lena stood at the pulpit, hand over her mouth, tears streaming. And I simply sat still, not joyful, not triumphant, just silent, a silence heavy as granite. Because sometimes justice doesn't need applause. Justice only needs light strong enough to expose the truth to an entire town. And today, that light had done exactly that. 30 days pass faster than people think, especially when an entire town is watching the downfall of a son-in-law who once bragged like a king and then had his mask ripped off right in the middle of a church. That morning, Mesa Luna Drive was strangely quiet. Quiet enough that you could hear the wind slapping against the stop sign at the corner. I parked the C10 far away under the shade of a cottonwood tree, the red striped towel still tucked in my back pocket, like a piece of my life that couldn't be separated from me. 7:45 a.m. Sheriff Morales arrived exactly on time. The patrol vehicle stopped in front of the house, amber lights blinking softly without sirens. Silence can be the loudest notice of all. A few neighbors stood on their porches, arms folded. Some younger people lifted their phones to record. Not a crowd like a fair, but enough for Dean to understand this morning wasn't private. An old woman at number 33 whispered, "It's time." Morales carried the case file up the front steps, the same steps Dean once stood on to brag to the world that he was the man who made the mortgage happen. Now those steps echoed cold beneath the sheriff's boots. Morales knocked 3 times, hard, clear, enough for everyone inside to know hiding was no longer an option. Dean opened the door, hair a mess, wrinkled t-shirt, eyes red from lack of sleep or alcohol. I didn't care. Morales spoke in a tone as calm as a weather report. "Mr. Herrick's, today is day 30 of the notice to vacate. The court requires you to leave immediately." Dean laughed, a choked, drunken, desperate sound. "This house, it's my house. I fixed it. I paid." Morales raised his hand, cutting him off with a sheet of paper. "Property owner, Rowan Pitts. You have no legal right to reside here. If you refuse to leave, we will remove you. By force, neighbors murmured. Someone whispered, he still thinks it's his house. Dean's face flushed, and he jabbed a finger toward Morales. I'm not leaving. You can't make me. And right then he made the biggest mistake of his life. He stormed down the steps, straight toward me. Less than 20 feet away, Morales raised his arm instantly. Stop! You are violating a restricted access order. Minimum distance is 500 feet. Dean froze, his face drained of color. The crowd let out a collective, "Oh my God!" Morales stepped forward, his voice turning to steel. If you take one more step toward Mr. Pitts, I will place you under arrest. Dean's eyes darted wildly. His breath came in short, panicked bursts, like an engine about to blow. Then he saw the dozens of cameras pointed at him. He stepped back half a pace, but it was too late. The violation was done. Morales spoke clearly. Recorded. Violation of a protection order. Captured by multiple witnesses. Dean screamed, I just want to talk to my wife. Lena stepped into the doorway, pale, red-eyed, but no longer shaking, no longer defending him, no longer standing on the wrong side. She spoke a single sentence that froze the entire front yard. Dean, don't come near my dad again. Her voice was soft, but sharp as a freshly honed blade. I looked at my daughter, not with victory, but with the quiet ache of someone who has waited a long time for their child to finally wake up. Dean pointed at her, lips trembling. You choose him over me? Lena didn't answer. That silence was the answer. Morales handed the notice back to Dean. You have 20 minutes to gather personal belongings. After that, you must vacate. Dean let out a frantic, broken laugh. 20 minutes? I lived here 2 years. 2 years as a guest, Morales corrected. Not an owner. He turned to the neighbors. Everyone step back. Please don't interfere. The street fell silent. Every camera recording. Dean slammed the door so hard the glass shook. From outside, everyone could hear the sounds of furniture thrown, drawers yanked open, the chaos of a man trying to cling to a life he never built himself. I stood 30 paces away, not moving, not speaking. Sometimes silence is the sharpest blade. 15 minutes later, Dean emerged. 2 plastic bags, 1 backpack, 1 torn cardboard box. Everything left of a man who once stood in a church, shouting that I was demented and had abandoned my daughter. He looked at me, eyes empty, wild. You ruined me. I shook my head just once. You did that yourself. It was the only sentence I spoke that morning. Morales motioned with his hand. Step back from the property line, Mr. Herricks. Dean stood in the sunlight, squinting, hair disheveled, shirt stained with dust. Lena stood on the porch, her hand over her mouth. Neighbors lined the sidewalk like 2 silent rows of witnesses. Someone filming a TikTok whispered, The day Dean Herricks gets kicked off Mesa Luna Drive. My God. Dean tried to say something to Lena, but no words came. Lena only shook her head. She didn't step down, didn't reach out, didn't hold on. Morales opened the patrol vehicle door. Mr. Herricks, leave the area now. If you are still nearby when I return to check, I will arrest you for violating the protection order. Dean staggered down the slope, clutching his bags. His footsteps scraped across the gravel like metal dragging against concrete. No one saw him off. No one opened a door for him. No one stood beside him. Only the wind moved through Mesa Luna Drive, carrying the dry sage scent and the lonely chill of a morning where a man lost everything simply because he believed he had the right to crush others. I stood still, not happy, not vengeful, just seeing order finally fall back into place. And as Dean's figure shrank down the slope, I knew this wasn't the final period, but it was certainly the end of a man who thought he could humiliate me in my own backyard. That morning, Mesa Luna Drive changed hands, not on paper, but in the eyes of the whole town. And the truth, once again, One in the simplest way, by standing still and letting the light hit it. 6 weeks after the day Lena stood in the middle of Sierra Valley Methodist Church and told the whole truth in front of more than 200 people, the small town slipped back into its usual rhythm. But everyone knew nothing was truly usual anymore. I still drove the old F-150 to the garage every morning, lifted the roll-up door and listened to the steel rattle like a familiar note. The smell of motor oil, hot metal, and time-worn dust settled over the '68 Mustang I'd been restoring, the only thing that had stayed silent with me for 8 years. Now that silence wasn't a wound anymore. It was freedom. Dean stood on the opposite side of freedom. After the restricted access order barred him from coming within reach of Mesa Luna Drive, 2 legal files nearly detonated at the same time. The first came from Sun Mesa Casino, a full set of transaction logs, time-stamped footage, and swipe card history sent to the Attorney General's office. Not a major crime, but because it involved interstate wires, enough to charge a misdemeanor. The second, and far heavier on his dignity, was the bank file Suncrest sent to the district attorney, a PDF metadata report showing the creator listed as dean.herricks.home, a forged signature with the wrong curve angle, the final stroke completely off from my handwriting, and a notary stamp in a banned font list. Those 3 items alone constituted attempted home equity fraud and forgery, Class E. Not prison time, but enough to lock every career door in his face for years. The hearing took one morning. Dean wore a cheap striped shirt, hands trembling, eyes never lifting toward Lena or me. His public defender made a weak attempt. The district attorney laid down 3 pieces of evidence, 1, 2, 3, clean as hammer strikes. The judge read the ruling, his voice heavy as a slab of stone. Forgery, attempted financial deception, violation of notary integrity, gambling offense with interstate elements. Dean swallowed hard. I saw his whole frame collapse half an inch. Finally, the court issued 12 months probation, mandatory supervision, compulsory financial education, fines, and, most crushing for him, prohibition from applying for any credit over $20,000 for 3 years. Forgery, Class E, was entered in the public record. The punishment wasn't huge, but the humiliation was enough to smash his entire life onto the concrete. Consequences came faster than I expected. 1 week later, 3 real estate firms in Albuquerque rejected his applications. One bank even mailed a blunt letter, application denied due to integrity risk. In a small town like Sierra Valley, bad news travels faster than sage wind over the hills. Everyone knew he didn't just lose money gambling, he forged his father-in-law's signature to take a house. And that's a sin no one forgives. The divorce hearing was quieter. Alice Granger submitted the county court ruling into the divorce file. 3 lines. Forgery. Attempted fraud. Gambling case. The judge looked at Lena, at me, then said only, grounds for divorce, fully substantiated. No property splits because whatever's in your name stays yours. No alimony because Dean lost his job through his own misconduct. When leaving the courthouse, Dean slipped through the crowd like a ghost. He didn't look at Lena, didn't look at me, didn't look at anyone. I heard he moved to Albuquerque and rented somewhere temporary. The specifics didn't matter. His life from here on wasn't something I cared to follow. What I cared about was Lena, and for the first time in 8 years, she chose not to stand with the man who ruined her life. She stood with the truth, but Lena didn't try to redeem herself with words. She used actions. 3 mornings a week, she arrived at the garage before I did, swept the floor, logged inventory, organized the tool racks piece by piece. I told her she didn't need to. She shook her head and said, "Dad, let me take responsibility for my part." One morning she stood watching me adjust the Mustang's steering column, her hands trembling when I handed her the pliers. She said the sentence I'd waited years to hear. I thought I was protecting Dean. Turns out I was only blinding myself. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. When someone recognizes their own mistake, they've already walked halfway back. Lena even asked to manage the books for the Sierra Valley Mechanical Apprenticeship Fund. She said she wanted to contribute something lasting, not to pay off a debt to me, but to fix herself. And I believed her. Not because she's my daughter, but because for the first time I saw her standing upright, leaning on no one. After 42 days, my Mustang was finished. I launched the first class for the apprenticeship fund. The kids gathered around, eyes wide as the engine fired up. Lena stood in the corner, writing down every name. Seeing her then, I knew I had regained something I thought was lost forever. A daughter who understood respect in its true form. One afternoon, I drove the Mustang down Highway 17. The sage wind hit my face, and the road opened like a second home to the rest of my life. When I returned to the garage, I found an envelope from the courthouse on the step. I opened it. Dean Herrick's. Probation confirmed. Forgery case 11F742. Gambling case finalized. I folded the letter and placed it in the top drawer where I keep things that need closing. Then I hung the red-striped towel on a new hook, turned off the garage lights, and told myself the sentence I had waited 8 years to say. Justice didn't return me to the past. It just gave me back the steering wheel for the rest of the road. And this time, no one gets to sit in the driver's seat but me. When I shut the garage door that night, the yellow light fell across the concrete floor like the last trace of 8 silent years. Dean faced judgment. Lena chose truth again. The house on Mesa Luna Drive was no longer a stage for someone to humiliate me, but proof that a man only needs to stand upright once to change the whole story. If you've ever been belittled in your own home, used for your kindness, kept silent to keep the peace, only to receive a knife in return, leave a single, so I know you're still here, and that you deserve to see justice stand on your side.